We are back. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky. Unfortunately, this week, Susan's not with us, and that's okay because we have two bald experts in the room.
We're just cheap on the shampoo.
That's right. My actually, it's so funny. My wife, she's been commented on her hair like probably 6 or 7 times in the last few days. Like, wow, your hair looks nice. Everywhere from a restaurant we were at to like, we're just out and about. And I was like, no one comments on my hair.
What about me? I have needs too.
And yeah, that's the voice of our special guest this week, AJ Kumar, the founder and CEO of the Limitless Company. And he's also known as the Digital Maestro and the author of Guru Inc. He's with us. AJ, how are you?
I'm fantastic. And thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. And I mean, obviously, if you like listening to the show, we always start off with a quote. So I have one today from Jeffrey Pfeffer. And he's one of the academics that I really love in the leadership space. He's written the book, 7 Rules of Power. He's a Stanford professor in the business school. He's also wrote that paper that I source a lot about how companies manage people is the 5th leading cause of death in the United States. And one of the things that he talks about in with respect to gaining power and authority in the world is building a personal brand. And so the quote today that he has is, being memorable equals getting picked.
Mm.
Now, AJ, obviously, I gave a little insight to folks. Now, you're a personal branding expert, and what do you think about the quote?
I love it. That makes so much sense. It reminds me of, like when you had your, back in the days when phones were relatively new and you had us, you were limited on minutes and you had to choose your like fave 5. So it's essentially like the people that you have in your fave 5 are the most memorable ones. They're the ones that you're going to pick. So I think that's what you have to do nowadays. You have to be on everyone's top fave 5 list.
And it's always Charles Barkley, right? Deep cuts into the Verizon commercials.
This guy knows.
That's right. So, I mean, AJ, we didn't really talk a little bit about you, but for folks out there, tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you earn the nickname Digital Maestro?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm the Digital Maestro, and what I do is I'm helping my clients get viral worthy attention, and attention is something that we help our clients measure because it's really the currency of today. So I've been in social media, digital marketing for over 15 years now. I started with coming into the space with real world skills that I learned from my cousin, who was like this mortgage guru back in like 2007 and 2008 era. And then after that, I connected with a buddy of mine that I knew in high school named Neil Patel, and he was my he essentially taught me the digital world skills that I needed to know. As I started learning that and kind of combining those two worlds of real world skills and digital world skills, I partnered up with his cousin Susan, and we had a company called Single Grain. So that was an SEO company where we were primarily working with corporate brands and we were helping them with their search engine optimization. So I did that for a few years. It was great. We took the company and turned it into a 7-figure business. And then at some point, I personally just started drifting away from wanting to work with corporate brands. And I was gravitating towards wanting to work with personal brands. So at the time, I partnered up with one of my clients who was a woman named Kimberly Snyder. She's a celebrity nutritionist. So I essentially helped her take her blog from 30,000 visitors a month to over 500,000 visitors a month. And that was what like really gave me this new idea, new understanding of what's possible, because I took these corporate marketing strategies, these digital marketing strategies, applied it to a person, a real human being. And I got to see this transformation firsthand right in front of my eyes of how somebody essentially becomes a celebrity, right? And I got to see and create the effect of what happens when you get that kind of level of fame, even on the internet. Mm-hmm. And with her, that resulted in a multi-million-dollar business. A lot of it was digital products, physical products, and we even helped her turn her into a New York Times bestselling author 3 times. And from that, I essentially, by building her entire infrastructure, which is now referred to as a personality-driven media company, I took that and turned it into a blueprint. And then I did it with another person that was a TV star. And then in 2020, I rebranded to creating the Limitless Company, because before my company was called Limitless Publishing, but I turned it into the Limitless Company. And now we are essentially an end-to-end studio system for influencers and brands. And we help our clients position themselves as authorities in the marketplace. And the name Digital Maestro, it actually comes from one of my business mentors who called me that, which is essentially, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm orchestrating this entire experience for each of my clients. You know, it's like musicians play their instruments, I play the orchestra. So I'm the conductor, and then you have all of these musicians, which are all the people on the team. And then you have the talent who's essentially facing the audience. All the people on the team aren't necessarily playing musical instruments, but they're playing digital instruments. Think of smartphones, cameras, laptops, computers, keyboards. They're using their fingers, they're using their brains, they're using their hearts, they're using their minds. And we're all orchestrating an integrated brand experience that the audience, which isn't in front of the person, but they're across all space and time, are listening to it. So that's where the name comes from.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And AJ, something that, like, obviously we talked, the quote off the top was about really being noticed is being picked, right? And so when Jeffrey talks about it, he actually talks about it in the context of companies, or it's also in the world. Now, for folks out there, like a lot of our leaders are executives, or they're trying to build up through a company. They may not be trying to become, the next Simon Sinek or whatever. Like, how would you advise them to think about why it's important to build a personal brand so they can advance their career?
That's a really good question. I think what really changed in the last few years, obviously the pandemic, but from my point of view, I've been in the digital world for over, like I said, 15 years. And from my perspective, I got to see like the rest of the world kind of fall into the digital world. So from my perspective, I think that we live in the digital world first. I think the digital world augments the physical world already. I know everyone's waiting for like those glasses, but I think what you're seeing on social media is essentially influencing how you act and behave in real life anyways, especially when it comes to corporate environments, because that has significantly changed. There are companies that are getting people to go back to work 3 times a week, but at the same time, there are also tons of companies out there that are fully remote based. So you don't have the same like physical proximity that people used to have before. So whether you're trying to become the next Oprah, or you just want to advance in your career, by having a personal brand and becoming essentially a thought leader and becoming known as a thought leader in your organization is going to help you advance, because then people could see you, whether it's your leadership that's watching you, or it's the people that follow you and look up to you. They get to see you in action, and they get to see that now in real time. And that's just going to help you grow quicker, up the corporate ladder, or just advance you in your career.
Yeah, totally. And this is like, when I think about personal branding, obviously I'm trying to build one as a coach, but even when I was working in corporate, it was very much for me, the way I thought about it was exactly sort of how Jeffrey Pfeffer thinks about it, is if they don't know who you are and they don't know anything about you, you're not getting picked. Like, you're not going to get advanced.
Yeah.
And you can build internally brands. So like Yammer sites or the SharePoints, the internal company blog, like these are all accessible things for folks, as well as, like the standard Gary Vee says, everyone should have a podcast.
Yeah. Everyone and their mom should have a podcast.
right? And that gives you two things, right? Like when I started my first podcast, which would have been 5 years ago, internally, the company, like all the folks listened to it. It wasn't that it was, I mean, eventually it was more externally, but a lot of people listened to it internally. And it changed the way they thought of me. And I think that, and it actually led to me getting my next job. So I do think that folks should, I mean, I don't necessarily think you have to start a podcast, but there's elements there that if you're internally branding, it sets you apart from other folks who aren't, and then you'll be noticed by people that you may not even know yet, and they may choose you for the next role.
Yeah, exactly. It ties into exactly what you said. You know, when you're memorable, you're picked. And I think a lot of, it's like the whole concept of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I would say it's evolved from that. It's not just who you know, it's who knows you. And for people to know you and to like develop these relationships with you by doing it on, social media as one of the mediums to build your personal brand. Like, yeah, like you said, you don't need to necessarily start a podcast, but if people start to see you on social media more frequently, it does put you on their mind more. And it's like that concept of, it takes, 7, 10, whatever touch points before somebody buys from you. The same concept applies. If someone starts to see you over and over and over and over again, especially with you talking about a certain subject matter, then automatically you're going to be in their minds as an expert on that matter. And as you get better or you do things like you're on other people's podcasts, you're on stages, now subconsciously you're being positioned as an authority. And it's not like you're telling people, hey, I'm an authority, listen to me. You're literally demonstrating it, right? Like you're demonstrating your value. And people are going to notice that. Like you don't even know the people that are going to notice that. But like you're saying, that's the kind of stuff that helps you advance.
Totally. AJ, so for folks out there, like let's say they're listening, they're like, I haven't really thought about this, but I want to get started. How would you recommend someone think about what their personal brand should be?
Yeah. So I think the best way, because right now, all the top players, all the top business leaders are building their personal brands now. And if they're not, they're definitely thinking about it. And there's quite a few people out there that are doing it. I think the easiest way to do it is by finding people that you like and starting to model them. So a lot of the most elite players in the world have done this across different industries. For example, like Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant talks about how he's learned moves from Michael Jordan, Julius Erving. He's even taken moves from soccer players. And he's mixed that all together to formulate his own style, right? I think the same thing applies with when you want to build your personal brand. There's a lot of people out there that are probably doing something similar to what you want to do. And you could pick and choose, follow those people, choose the things that you like, and integrate that into your own style. And then as you do that over a period of time, it'll start to feel like it's your own style.
Totally. I think that's the piece, right? And we talk a lot on the show about being authentic. And I mean, I don't really like that word necessarily because I think it's overused.
Yeah.
But as you find and you learn and you craft more about who you are and who you want to become, then being authentic is not this show that you need to put on for other folks, right? It's just who you are. And yes, that takes time to sort of understand and do the deep internal work, but then it just kind of just becomes like, I don't think about coming on the show going, you know what, today, like obviously I researched the quote, but I'm not sitting there going, I wonder what I should say to AJ next. It's just sort of like we're having a conversation. We've been on this show. I've talked to you before. So we sort of know each other and we just jump on and chat. And I think that's the thing for folks is if you learn word for word some talking point, often it doesn't come across as real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a lot of it. And especially in the beginning, like I understand, I work with I worked with the spectrum of people from being brand new to being established experts, right? And everybody across that spectrum wants to grow their brand because it's just what people see. It is how you become memorable. It is how you get picked. And in the beginning, it's rough, right? Like you may not, most people aren't trained in creating succinct messaging that is easy to remember. But as you become an expert and as you want to go to that next level yourself, I think that journey of building a personal brand is not just about like showing off, but I think it's more of an inward journey itself. Because, it's like at the end of the day, are you really competing with other people or are you really competing with yourself? And I think the journey of building your personal brand is a journey of becoming the best version of yourself, right? Because then you're presenting yourself to the world and it just makes you want to research more, learn more, talk about more things succinctly, right? Like when ideas are too complex, it's really hard for people to understand it. And then people don't really remember that. In fact, they might get confused or they might even think of themselves being stupid, which makes them, what's the opposite of attraction? Like it repels them, right? Yeah. Whereas when you could simplify things so that people understand it, they'll gravitate towards you even more.
That's such a great point. And my dad always used to say, you truly know an expert when they can explain really difficult concepts to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
It's something that we used to watch the Richard Feynman tapes about physics in college. And I always found him just amazing because he's literally taking these very complex physics problems and just sort of like, he walks by a stream and he's explaining these things. And wow, I always found it amazing.
Yeah.
Now, AJ, like, can you tell us a little bit about the book, right? So you're bringing out this book called Guru Inc. What's your mission with this book?
Yeah. So the book is talking about what's happening now. From my perspective and from the last, over a decade being in the space, I could see that everyone is essentially trying to build that personal brand. And that is essentially a journey that you go on. There's a hierarchy of what occurs when you're building your personal brand. There's what I call it the hierarchy of influencers. And there's 5 different levels. The first level is when you're a generalist. And this is when you are just, you're the jack of all trades. You're trying to figure out what your shtick is. And then once you really start to hone, I always like to give the analogy of a doctor. It's like when you have a cold, you go see the generalist doctor. But if you're having heart problems, then you're probably going to want to see a specialist, right? A specialist is someone that's diving deeper into that field of expertise. They're really niching down. And then once you niche down and you become really good, and after you start modeling what other people are doing, then you become an authority because now you're starting to create your own stuff. You're starting to create original content. This is when you start to have peer-reviewed studies, right? Like you have your other peers that support your work, that support what you're doing. But the challenge that most people have when they're at the level of authority is that they're not really known. So that's when you start to realize that you need to incorporate other areas of interest. You need to develop media skills. You need to really hone in on your personality and your charm and your charisma and all of this stuff that sounds elusive at first. But then once you kind of dive into that world, you realize that these are the kinds of people that other people are following. So if you really want to become a thought leader and you want followers that are guided by what you're doing, people are looking for thought leaders. And once you could demonstrate and show what it is that you're doing, then you go to that next level, which is the guru. The guru is like when you go to an industry event, they're the ones at the lunch table that everybody wants to sit around. They're celebrities in their own sense. They're famous within their industry. They're a leader in their industry. And then there's this highest level, which I call the guru's guru. This is when you go from being a leader in your industry to being a leader for your industry, right? It's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference because now you're representing your industry to the rest of the world. This is when you become the Oprah, the Ellen, the Martha Stewart, Dr. Oz. regardless of how you feel about those people and what they've done, they've reached the highest echelon of their industry, right? When you could reach that highest level of a guru's guru, you could even take that to becoming the president of the United States, right? It's a really powerful place to be in. So the book really talks about how all these people right now that are business leaders, executives, everyone that's trying to build their personal brand is essentially trying to ascend up that ladder.
That's amazing. I never thought about it that way, but it's totally, I mean, obviously you're the expert, so that's why you're here, but that's really interesting. Yeah.
I've been around, like I grew up around gurus, right? Like the gurus I grew up around were like typically spiritual gurus. And I grew up in America. I grew up in Orange County in California. And I had spiritual gurus. There was like a photo of one of the gurus on our wall growing up that you would pray to and talk to. And over time, I realized that in the business world, there's also gurus. And I started working with, I dropped out of college and then I started working with that cousin I was telling you about that was a mortgage guru. And he was part of another organization with real estate gurus. And I got to realize that in every industry, there are gurus, people that you want to go see, people that like when they show up in your city, you're like, hey, I want to go there. I want to go watch this guy. I want to learn from this guy. Even though they're saying like the same things over and over again, it's still like, it's this, I don't know, it's this feeling that you get of like comfort and knowing I could trust this person. He's telling me the truth. He's telling me what I need to know so that I could feel better, do better, right? Things like that.
There's two things I want to dig in. So the first one you said is folks are looking for people to follow. Can you tell us more about that? Like it feels like the internet has just, you could follow literally anybody. There's so many people to follow. Like for folks out there, like a common misconception is like, why would people want to listen to me? How would you bust that myth?
So right now there's billions and billions of pieces of content. There's billions of people that are connected to mobile devices. The amount of information that we're getting is unprecedented. It's never occurred. Just like many of the events that we've seen in the last decade are all unprecedented events that never occurred. So we're all in this moment in time right now where you don't know what's happening next. Apparently aliens are real, right? Like it's a new game. And there's just so much stuff out there that when you're curating information as a leader, when you're able to take the stuff that's working and deliver it through experience and deliver it in a way that's interesting and entertaining, people love that. People want that. There's not enough of that. And I think that's essentially what I mean is that if you want people to listen to you, then package information up in a way that's entertaining and easy to digest, because there's people that are hungry for information. I know there's an excess amount of information, but people are hungry for the right information. They want the most relevant thing to them. And that's the way algorithms on social media platforms are built. They're built to deliver the most relevant things to their users, because when they do that, the users are satisfied. I always relate content creation to food, right? It's the same as there's junk food, there's also junk content. And you could see the junk content out in the world and the negativity that it brings to people, whether it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And then there's also nutritional content that when you consume it, you feel better, you know things that you didn't know before, you feel inspired, you feel entertained, right? Like people are bored, people want entertainment. So when you could intentionally create content in that way, there's a huge demand of people that are ready and ready to just wanting it, right? They just want to consume it.
There's definitely, entertainment is not it's not an overlooked piece, right? It's like often you watch like cat videos or dog videos and you're not learning much, but it's totally entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about marketing in general, you're marketing, you're essentially solving people's problems. Boredom is a huge problem. And I love following like funny people, comedians, people that do skits. I try to get my fair share of of different types of content, right? Stuff that's pure entertaining, and then stuff that I'm learning from. But I'd rather learn from people that are entertaining, right? It's like what we talked about before of people that could explain it simply and in an entertaining way. Like look at guys like Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? Kind of to what you were saying about physics. You have science, which is super complicated and most people don't really like it in school. But then when someone could do it in a fun and entertaining way and make, create experiments and show things, it becomes more fun to learn. And for me, that's what I'm really excited about. I dropped out of college because it seemed boring to me. Like I was trying to study marketing and sales, but in my first year or so, you have to do all these prerequisites, and I didn't even get to the good stuff. So it's like there's all this, like a lot of what I do is about making learning fun, right? Because that's how these platforms are. They're entertainment first. And when you could do that, then a lot of people are going to want to listen to
you. The second thing I wanted to ask you, AJ, was this element of the gurus say the same thing over and over. And I just want to harken back, right? As you mentioned, and this is true, it's people have to hear it 7 to 10 times to actually remember the thing. And when I talk to my leaders about, how they should pitch ideas internally to influence folks, I'm like, just talk about it at all times. And you're going to feel like you're just saying the same thing, but it's because there's new folks and they have to hear it many times. And you just want to keep saying it until people start coming to you and go, hey, what's that idea? I heard this idea about, or I thought of this thing about, and it's just the thing you're saying.
Yeah.
Can you break that down, right? Is for folks who are starting on their personal branding journey, or maybe they're even midway, it's like, why is the same thing done in maybe different ways so important?
Yeah, that's a really good observation on that specific thing. And yeah, that is true. Because people learn differently, right? Some people are more visual learners. Some people are more kinesthetic learners. Some people are more auditory learners. People just learn differently. People have different strengths. It's not necessarily one or the other. So it's like a lot of people that go to school, you're part of a lecture, but most kids aren't really paying attention because they may be more visual learners, or they may be wanting to be more engaged with highlighting and doing things if they're more kinesthetic. So when it comes to leadership and teams and groups and getting people to do stuff, even if you're a real estate guru trying to train, teach all these real estate agents, hey, door knock, prospect, etc., it's because everyone's flooded with all this different information. And for the guru, it does seem like repetitive at first, or it does seem a little counterintuitive at first, because you're like, I already said that. But when you could say that and say that differently, wearing a different shirt, saying it differently, having a different metaphor, having a different way that you're delivering the information, a person starts to remember that, right? It takes that, like you said, it takes 5, 6, 7 touch points before somebody's like, and it's funny because people think it's their idea. And I think that's what a leader, I think that's what at some point in leadership you start to realize, is that you got to make it feel like it's their idea, because then they're more likely to do it versus someone saying, hey, do this, do that. Then it becomes more of a you're a kid and it's your parents telling you what to do and you don't want to do it, right? There's some psychology behind that. But when you could get people to think of it as if it's their own idea, they're more likely to do it. And at the end of the day, as a leader, you want people to get the job done.
Yep. I have to ask you one question before we get into some of the heavy hitters, but you work with a lot of Gen Zs on your team and younger folks, right? Because they're truly the experts on social media. They're digital natives and they do all these things. Now, obviously, a lot of our audience are middle managers. They're typically a bit older. What are some of your top tips for you to share with them about how should they think about working with Gen Zs or managing Gen Zs in the workplace?
Yeah. So Gen Z professionals, they're interesting because they don't have much, a lot of them grew up watching internet TV, YouTube, social media, things like that. A lot of them typically haven't had corporate experience. And it's funny to them because their understanding of it is mostly from TV, whether it's The Office or just shows that they watch. So one thing is to know is that you got to kind of help them understand how it works, but at the same time, what I always talk about, and this is one of my business mentors taught me, is to create a positive and safe, nurturing environment. Because a lot of Gen Z are super creative. They're part of a hive mind in a sense because all of them grew up essentially connected to media, and people make all these assumptions of them of like, they lack loyalty or they don't want careers or anything like that. But in reality, they're very smart. They're very in tune with what's going on. And if you could create an environment that's safe for them to learn and grow and help them understand meaning and how they're contributing to something that's meaningful, then you'll get really amazing results from them.
I love it. So AJ, we got to ask you a few of the harder hitting questions.
Let's do it.
If there's anything you could tell our community of leaders, what would that be?
I think if I were talking to the community of leaders, I would say practice what you preach. I think a lot of people doing what you're saying to do and talking about comes down from them seeing you do it. And then when other people watching you do it, you're being congruent. I think leadership has a lot to do with congruency, where what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you're doing are all in alignment. So if you're telling people what to do and you're not doing it yourself, then naturally you're coming off a little bit incongruent. It's not to say that it's not going to work, but it's not going to work at the impact that you may want. So that when you could integrate all of that together and demonstrate the value, I think you'd be a lot more impactful as a leader.
Awesome. And our last one that we ask all our guests, what do you want your legacy to be?
It's a big question. Like I'm 37 years old, so I know I still have a long time to figure out what that legacy is going to actually be. But I would say it would be about accomplishing great things. I want to accomplish great things, and I want to help other people accomplish great things. So the legacy I want to leave is that this guy was able to accomplish big stuff.
Amazing. And definitely, it's something we ask all our leaders, and we have all of them do. So we totally recommend you going down the path of starting to think about it. But totally. And for folks out there, so if you want to connect with AJ, check out limitless.inc. That's the website. I've dropped his LinkedIn and his Instagram in the podcast notes as well. And is there anywhere else you want folks to find you?
Yeah, you could follow me on Instagram, AJ, the Digital Maestro.
Awesome. So that's in the podcast notes. Now, for us, obviously, hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project and share this show with any leaders in your life or folks who are looking to build a personal brand. That's totally a great space to go. And for any one-on-one leadership mindset coaching, group corporate programs, conflict management, EQ, and more, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for all of that. AJ, is there anything you want to leave our leaders with this week?
Do good work.
I love
accomplish great things.
Yeah. And for me, I want to echo what AJ mentioned earlier, is personal branding and building the brand is a journey to becoming who you are. And when I was working with my speaker coach to put together the TED Talk, it wasn't about writing a talk that we thought was going to go viral, right? It was actually, she spent a lot of time just talking with me to understand who I am. And then we incorporated the elements that I am naturally. Like I make jokes about weird things. I like to bring in research. We talk about like Britney Spears. Like these are things that I do, and it's just who I am. And actually coming out of that, I said to her, I was like, you gave me the permission to be me. And I think that that's the part that folks will resonate with. And it is a journey because often we don't see ourselves. So having those mirrors of truth around us help us really find out who we are. And that allows us to bring that gift to the world. So go on that personal leadership journey and learn about you. AJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Ciao.